Nada Huranieh's lifeless body was discovered at the edge of Willow Park. A jogger found her slumped against a weathered wooden bench, her phone clutched tightly in one hand and her other arm stretched out as if reaching for help. At first glance, it appeared to be an unfortunate accident, perhaps a fall or even a heart attack, but something about the scene felt off. Detective Laura Monroe arrived within minutes, her sharp eyes scanning the area. She was a seasoned investigator known for solving cases others deemed unsolvable. This time, however, she sensed this wouldn't be straightforward. The park was eerily quiet except for the rustling leaves and distant hum of traffic. Nada, a 32-year-old graphic designer and beloved member of the community, had no known enemies. Friends described her as kind-hearted and ambitious, always juggling freelance projects while volunteering at local art galleries. Yet here she lay, pale and still, with a faint bruise forming near her temple. As Detective Monroe examined the scene, she noticed something peculiar: an old security camera mounted high on a lamppost nearby. It wasn't part of the city's official surveillance system, but rather a private device installed by a homeowner whose backyard bordered the park. Its blinking red light suggested it might have captured footage of what happened. Monroe wasted no time securing permission from the homeowner to review the footage. Back at the station, she sat hunched over a monitor, watching grainy black and white images flicker across the screen. What she saw sent chills down her spine. The video showed Nada walking briskly through the park just after sunset, her breath visible in the crisp air. Suddenly, a shadowy figure emerged from behind a tree, moving with deliberate intent. There was no struggle, no scream, just a brief moment where Nada turned sharply before collapsing to the ground. The figure lingered for a few seconds, glanced around nervously, then vanished into the darkness. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. Monroe leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. Who was the mysterious figure? And why target someone like Nada? As she stared at the frozen frame of the shadowy silhouette, one thing became clear. Unraveling this mystery would require piecing together fragments of Nada's life and uncovering secrets she may have kept hidden. Detective Laura Monroe spent the next day immersed in Nada Huranieh's world, determined to understand who she was and who might want her dead. The more Monroe learned, the more complex Nada's life seemed. On the surface, she appeared to be an ordinary young woman thriving in Cedar Ridge, but beneath that facade lay layers of ambition, relationships, and potential conflicts. Monroe began by interviewing Nada's closest friends and colleagues. Her best friend, Maya Patel, described her as fiercely independent yet deeply caring. "She worked hard, played harder," Maya said, tears welling up in her eyes. But lately, she'd been stressed, like something was weighing on her. "Did she mention anything specific?" Monroe asked gently. Maya hesitated. "Not really, just vague comments about needing to fix things or cleaning up messes. I thought it was work-related, you know? Deadlines, client drama, stuff like that." Monroe nodded, making a mental note to dig deeper into Nada's professional life. Next, she visited Design Haven, the co-working space where Nada often freelanced. The manager, Greg Owens, painted a picture of a talented designer who was always punctual and professional, but also intensely private. "She kept to herself mostly," Greg explained. "Friendly, sure, but not one to share personal details. Honestly, I don't think anyone here knew much about her outside of work." Still, Monroe pressed for information. Had Nada argued with anyone recently? Received strange messages or calls? Greg shook his head but mentioned that Nada had been working late nights for weeks leading up to her death. "I assumed she was cramming for a big project," he added. Back at the precinct, Monroe reviewed Nada's phone records and social media activity. While there were no overt signs of trouble, no threatening texts or alarming posts, she noticed a pattern of deleted messages and calls from unknown numbers over the past month. Someone had been reaching out to Nada, and she hadn't wanted anyone to know. The breakthrough came when Monroe accessed Nada's laptop. With the help of a tech specialist, she recovered fragments of encrypted emails exchanged between Nada and someone using the alias Watcher77. The tone of the messages ranged from polite to increasingly hostile. One email stood out. "You can't keep running forever, Nada. Face me or face the consequences." Who was Watcher 77? And what did they want from her? To piece together answers, Monroe turned to Nada's family. Her parents, immigrants from Syria, lived modestly in a nearby suburb. They spoke fondly of their daughter but admitted they hadn't seen her much lately. She was busy, her mother said softly, always chasing dreams bigger than herself. Yet during the conversation, Monroe picked up on a subtle detail. Nada's younger brother Sammy, now away at college, had once confided in their parents that Nada had gotten involved in something risky, a side gig designing logos for clients whose identities she refused to disclose. Armed with this new lead, Monroe reached out to Sammy. Over a video call, he reluctantly confirmed the story. It started small, he said. Freelance jobs, nothing sketchy. But then she told me some of these people weren't legit. She said she felt trapped, like she couldn't back out without consequences. The pieces were falling into place. Nada wasn't just a victim of random violence. She'd stumbled into dangerous territory. Whether it was organized crime, blackmail, or something else entirely remained unclear. But one thing was certain. Whoever killed her knew exactly what they were doing. As Monroe left the precinct that evening, the shadowy figure from the security footage loomed large in her mind. Somewhere in Cedar Ridge, a killer walked free, and Monroe vowed to bring them to justice. Detective Laura Monroe's investigation took a darker turn as she delved deeper into Nada Huranieh's secretive side gigs. The clues pointed towards something far more sinister than freelance design work, something that could have cost Nada her life. Monroe began by retracing Nada's digital footprint, combing through her online activity for any trace of the mysterious clients Sammy had mentioned. With the help of a cybercrime specialist, she uncovered hidden folders on Nada's laptop containing encrypted files and drafts of logos, unlike anything Monroe had seen before. These weren't designs for legitimate businesses. They were emblems associated with underground operations, counterfeit rings, illicit gambling dens, and even rumored human trafficking networks. This isn't just risky, the tech specialist muttered, scrolling through the recovered data. This is dangerous. If these groups thought she was a liability, he trailed off, letting the implication hang in the air. Monroe agreed. If Nada had inadvertently exposed herself to criminal elements, it would explain why someone wanted her silenced. But who was behind it, and how deep did this go? Her next step was to identify the alias Watcher77 from the threatening emails. Tracing the IP address led her to an internet cafe in downtown Cedar Ridge. Surveillance footage showed a man wearing a hoodie and baseball cap using one of the computers during the times the emails were sent. His face was partially obscured, but Monroe noticed a distinctive tattoo peeking out from under his sleeve, a snake coiled around a dagger. She circulated the image among local law enforcement agencies, hoping someone might recognize him. Meanwhile, she revisited Nada's phone records, focusing on the unknown numbers that had called her repeatedly in the weeks before her death. One number stood out. It belonged to a prepaid burner phone purchased at a convenience store less than 2 miles from Willow Park. The convenience store's security camera provided another lead. On the day of the purchase, a woman in her late 20s with dyed blonde hair and oversized sunglasses entered the shop. She paid in cash and left without speaking to anyone. Though grainy, the footage gave Monroe a clearer picture of Watcher 77's accomplice, or perhaps their pawn. As the puzzle pieces came together, Monroe decided to dig into Nada's financials. While her primary bank account showed nothing unusual, a secondary account revealed large deposits made irregularly over the past 6 months. Each deposit corresponded to dates when Nada claimed to be working late nights at Design Haven. Blackmail money, Monroe murmured, connecting the dots. Nada hadn't just been designing logos. She'd been extorting payment from her shadowy clients, likely threatening to expose them if they didn't comply. It was a desperate gamble, and one that ultimately sealed her fate. But the question remained, which client snapped? Monroe returned to the park where Nada's body was found, retracing her final steps. The security camera footage showed Nada walking briskly, as though heading somewhere specific. When she reached the bench, she paused, pulling out her phone. Moments later, the shadowy figure appeared, striking quickly and efficiently. What had Nada been doing? There? Had she arranged to meet someone? A search of her phone revealed fragments of deleted texts. Meet me at the usual spot. Bring everything. I swear I'll go to the cops if you don't leave me alone. The messages hinted at a confrontation. But with whom? Monroe's instincts told her the answers lay within the criminal underworld Neda had infiltrated. To get closer, she enlisted the help of Detective Ryan Vega, a former narcotics officer familiar with Cedar Ridge's underbelly. Together, they mapped out known associates of the organizations linked to Neda's designs. One name kept surfacing: Marcus Kane, a mid-level enforcer with ties to several illegal enterprises. Known for his volatile temper and ruthless tactics, Marcus fit the profile of someone capable of silencing a loose end. When Monroe tracked down Marcus, he denied knowing Neda, claiming he'd never heard of her. But when shown the recovered logo designs, his smug demeanor faltered. "Where did you get those?" he demanded, his voice tight with unease. "That's not your concern," Monroe replied coolly. "What matters is whether you know who killed her." Marcus refused to answer further questions, lawyering up almost immediately. Still, his reaction confirmed Monroe's suspicions. Neda's murder wasn't random. It was calculated, ordered by someone higher up the chain. As she left the interrogation room, Monroe felt the weight of the case pressing down on her. Whoever orchestrated Neda's death was still out there, watching, waiting, and they wouldn't hesitate to strike again if cornered. Detective Laura Monroe knew she was closing in on the truth, but every step forward seemed to reveal another layer of complexity. Marcus Kane's reaction had been telling. He wasn't just a hired thug, he was part of something bigger, a cog in a machine that thrived on secrecy and fear. To unravel the web surrounding Neda Huranieh's murder, Monroe needed to pull at its threads carefully. Knowing one wrong move could send the entire operation underground for good. Her first priority was identifying the woman with the dyed blonde hair who'd purchased the burner phone. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses painted a clearer picture of her movements after leaving the convenience store. She'd walked briskly toward a beat-up sedan parked in an alley, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting pursuit. The car's license plate was partially obscured by mud, but Monroe managed to extract enough digits to run a partial search. The results pointed to a registered owner, Vanessa Cole, a former exotic dancer with a rap sheet for petty theft and drug possession. Vanessa now lived in a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of Cedar Ridge. Monroe paid her a visit, finding her lounging on a stained couch surrounded by empty takeout containers. Vanessa was initially defensive, claiming ignorance about any burner phones or suspicious activities. But when Monroe mentioned Neda's name, Vanessa's bravado cracked. "Look, I didn't have anything to do with what happened to her," Vanessa stammered, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. "I was just doing a favor for someone." "For who?" Monroe pressed. Vanessa hesitated before mumbling. "Marcus. He said it was important, okay? Paid me $500 to pick up the phone and deliver it to him later." Monroe's suspicions deepened. If Marcus had enlisted Vanessa to procure the burner phone, it suggested premeditation, a calculated effort to avoid detection. But why go through such lengths unless he was acting on orders? To find out, Monroe revisited Marcus's background, focusing on his connections within the criminal underworld. Records revealed frequent communication between Marcus and a man named Victor Grady, a shadowy figure rumored to be the mastermind behind several illicit operations in the Midwest. Known only by reputation, Grady operated from the shadows, rarely surfacing in public but wielding immense power over those beneath him. Grady's name sent a chill through Monroe. If he was involved, this case went far beyond Cedar Ridge. It reached into organized crime networks spanning multiple states. Determined to build a stronger case, Monroe turned her attention back to Neda's encrypted files. With the help of the cybercrime specialist, she decrypted additional documents, uncovering invoices and correspondence related to the counterfeit logo designs. One email exchange stood out. "We need assurances that you'll stay quiet. Payment will continue monthly, but cross us and there will be consequences." The sender's address was untraceable, but embedded metadata revealed it had been routed through a server linked to Victor Grady's known associates. Armed with this evidence, Monroe sought a warrant to tap into Grady's communications. It wasn't easy. Grady was notoriously cautious, using burner phones and encrypted apps, but persistence paid off. Over the next few days, intercepted messages hinted at growing paranoia within his organization. "They're watching us," one message read. Clean up loose ends immediately. Loose ends. The phrase echoed in Monroe's mind. Nada hadn't just been collateral damage. She'd been targeted specifically because she knew too much. Meanwhile, Monroe also focused on the park where Nada died. Re-examining the security footage frame by frame, she noticed something she'd missed before, a faint reflection in a puddle near the bench. Zooming in, she identified the glint of a ring on the shadowy figure's hand, a distinctive signet ring engraved with a crest. She showed the image to Detective Ryan Vega, who recognized it instantly. "That's Grady's mark," he said grimly. "He gives them to his top enforcers as a symbol of trust." The discovery confirmed Monroe's worst fears. Victor Grady himself, or someone acting directly under his command, had orchestrated Nada's murder. With mounting evidence pointing to Grady, Monroe prepared to confront him head-on. But taking down a man like Grady wouldn't be easy. He was untouchable, protected by layers of deniability and loyal followers willing to do his dirty work. As she reviewed the case file late into the night, Monroe realized the stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just about justice for Nada. It was about dismantling an empire built on corruption and violence. And if she failed, more lives would be lost. Detective Laura Monroe knew that confronting Victor Grady would be a dangerous game of cat and mouse. Grady wasn't just a criminal mastermind. He was a ghost, slipping through cracks in the system with ease. To take him down, she needed irrefutable evidence, something so damning it couldn't be ignored or swept under the rug. Her first move was to tighten the net around Marcus Kane. With Vanessa Cole's testimony, corroborated by phone records linking her to Marcus, Monroe secured a warrant for his arrest on charges of accessory to murder. When officers brought him in, Marcus was defiant at first, sneering as if confident no one could touch him, or his boss. But Monroe played her cards carefully. She laid out the evidence piece by piece, the burner phone Vanessa had purchased, the encrypted emails tied to Nada's extortion scheme, and finally the security footage showing the shadowy figure wearing the signet ring. "You're not walking away from this," Monroe said firmly. "Not unless you give us Grady." Marcus hesitated, sweat beading on his forehead. For all his bravado, he was no match for Grady's wrath, and he knew it. After hours of interrogation, he cracked. "Fine," he muttered, slumping in his chair. "Grady ordered the hit. He found out about the girl, Nada, and freaked, said she was too close to blowing everything wide open." Monroe leaned forward. "Where can we find him?" Marcus shook his head. "No idea. None of us do. He moves constantly, changes locations every few days, but—" He paused, weighing his options. "There's a meeting tonight at an old warehouse near the docks. Big players will be there. If you act fast, maybe you can catch him." It was a risky lead, but Monroe didn't have time to second-guess it. She assembled a SWAT team and briefed them on the operation. The warehouse was a known hotspot for illegal activity, making it plausible that Grady would use it as a safe house. Still, surprise was their only advantage. If word got out they were coming, Grady would vanish again. As night fell over Cedar Ridge, Monroe led the raid, her heart pounding with anticipation. The warehouse loomed ahead, its windows dark and foreboding. Inside, voices echoed faintly, mingling with the hum of machinery. The team moved swiftly, breaching the building with precision. What they found inside chilled Monroe to the bone. Stacks of counterfeit goods, crates filled with unmarked cash, and a group of men gathered around a table littered with documents. Among them stood Victor Grady himself, a tall, imposing figure with cold eyes and an air of authority. "Freeze!" Monroe shouted, her gun trained on him. Grady raised his hand slowly, a smirk playing on his lips. "Detective Monroe," he said smoothly, "I've heard a lot about you." "We've got you," Monroe replied, stepping closer. "Murder, racketeering, conspiracy, it's over." Grady chuckled darkly. "You think this ends here? You're playing with forces you don't understand." Despite his bravado, the evidence was undeniable. Documents on the table linked Grady directly to Nada's blackmail payments and subsequent murder plot. As officers cuffed him, Monroe felt a surge of triumph, but it was short-lived. One of Grady's lieutenants lunged toward her, grabbing for a concealed weapon. Chaos erupted as shots rang out, echoing through the cavernous space. Monroe dove for cover, her training kicking in as she returned fire. The SWAT team quickly regained control, subduing the attackers, but not before one officer sustained a minor injury. When the dust settled, Grady was in custody, his empire crumbling around him. But as Monroe escorted him to the waiting squad car, his parting words lingered in her mind. "This isn't the end, you'll see." Back at the precinct, Monroe reviewed the seized documents, piecing together the full scope of Grady's operations. It was clear now why Nada had become a target. She'd stumbled into a world far darker than she'd realized, exposing vulnerabilities Grady couldn't afford to leave unchecked. Justice for Nada was within reach, but Monroe couldn't shake the feeling that Grady's warning held truth. Taking down one kingpin wouldn't dismantle the entire network. Somewhere others waited in the shadows, ready to step into the void. For now, though, Cedar Ridge could breathe easier. One monster had been stopped, but the fight was far from over. Victor Grady's arrest sent shockwaves through Cedar Ridge and beyond. News outlets buzzed with headlines about the takedown of one of the Midwest's most notorious crime bosses. For Detective Laura Monroe, it was a hard-won victory, but also a sobering reminder of how deeply entrenched corruption ran in their community. Grady's trial dominated the courts for months, drawing national attention. Evidence from the warehouse raid painted a damning picture. Financial records linking him to counterfeit rings, intercepted communications detailing orders for hits like Nada's, and witness testimonies from former associates eager to cut deals. Even Marcus Kane turned state's witness, providing insider accounts of Grady's ruthless tactics. Yet despite the overwhelming proof, Grady remained defiant. During courtroom proceedings, he sat stoically, his icy demeanor unshaken. When asked directly about Nada Huranieh's murder, he smirked and replied, "I don't know what you're talking about." Monroe knew better than to expect remorse, or even an admission of guilt, from someone like Grady. His silence was strategic, designed to protect those still loyal to him. But while Grady refused to cooperate, others weren't as tight-lipped. One key breakthrough came from Vanessa Cole, who agreed to testify after being granted immunity. Her testimony not only corroborated Marcus's account, but also revealed new details about Grady's operation. She described late-night meetings where plans were made to clean up loose ends, a chilling euphemism for murder. Nada wasn't the first, Vanessa admitted during her deposition, and she wouldn't have been the last if you hadn't stopped them. The revelation weighed heavily on Monroe. How many other lives had been lost because of Grady's greed and paranoia? The thought fueled her determination to ensure justice wasn't just served, it was seen. As the trial progressed, Monroe revisited Nada's case file, searching for closure. She reached out to Nada's family, sharing updates and offering reassurance that the person responsible for her death would face consequences. Nada's parents listened quietly, their grief tempered by gratitude. "She always wanted to make a difference," Nada's mother said softly, "even if it cost her everything." For Claire Thompson, Henry's wife, the betrayal cut deeper than ever. She visited Henry in the hospital, speaking to him as though he could hear her, clinging to the belief that he would one day awaken. Detective Mark Reynolds stayed involved, checking in periodically with updates on the ongoing legal proceedings against Victor and Sarah Lynn. Victor's trial dominated headlines once again, exposing layers of corruption that reached far beyond the Lakeshore Condos project. Prominent figures in Chicago's political and business circles were implicated, their careers crumbling under the weight of evidence unearthed during the investigation. Victor himself showed no remorse, maintaining his arrogant demeanor even as the verdict came down, guilty on all counts, including attempted murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, a fitting end for a man who had operated above the law for so long. Sarah received a reduced sentence for her cooperation, though she faced years behind bars. But amidst the closure brought by the trial, uncertainty lingered over Henry's fate. Doctors remained cautiously optimistic, noting small signs of improvement, twitches in his fingers, changes in brain activity, but warned there were no guarantees. For Claire, these incremental victories felt both cruel and comforting. She wanted to believe Henry would come back to her, but part of her feared what might happen if he did. Then one crisp winter morning, everything changed. Claire arrived at the hospital to find nurses gathered around Henry's bed, murmuring excitedly. He opened his eyes, one of them said, smiling broadly. Just for a moment, but it's a good sign. Claire rushed to his side, tears streaming down her face. Henry, she whispered, gripping his hand tightly. Can you hear me? At first there was no response. Then slowly his eyelids fluttered open again. His gaze was unfocused, clouded with confusion, but he seemed to recognize her voice. A faint squeeze of her hand confirmed it. He was aware. Over the next few days, Henry made remarkable progress. Speech therapists worked with him to regain his ability to talk, while physical therapists helped him rebuild strength in his muscles. Though weak and disoriented, Henry began piecing together fragments of memory. When Detective Reynolds visited, Henry listened intently as the detective recounted the events leading to Victor's arrest. I remember bits and pieces, Henry admitted hoarsely. The threats, the pressure. I thought I could handle it, but I underestimated how far they'd go. Reynolds nodded sympathetically. You're lucky to be alive, Henry. And because of your courage, we were able to take down someone who'd been hurting people for years. Henry looked away, guilt shadowing his expression. What about Elena and Lucas? Did they? They're safe, Reynolds assured him. They've been through a lot, but they're getting help. Elena feels responsible, but she didn't know what Victor was planning. Neither did you. As Henry processed this, Claire stepped closer, her eyes filled with emotion. We have a lot to figure out, she said softly. But I'm here, Henry. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. For the first time since waking, Henry smiled. A small, tentative gesture, but enough to spark hope. In the weeks that followed, Henry worked tirelessly to recover, driven by a newfound appreciation for life. He reached out to Elena and Lucas, determined to make amends and build a relationship with the son he barely knew. It wouldn't be easy. Trust had been shattered on all sides, and healing would take time. But Henry vowed to try, for their sake and for his own redemption. As spring returned to Maplewood, bringing warmth and renewal, Henry took his first steps outside the hospital. Standing beside Claire, he gazed at the town he loved, now forever altered by tragedy and triumph. I don't know what the future holds, he said quietly, but I'm ready to face it. And for the first time in a long while, Detective Mark Reynolds allowed himself to smile. Justice had been served, lives had been saved, and though scars remained, healing was possible. The nightmare was over, but the journey toward peace had only just begun.